Thank you everyone for joining us for our first session. This session is called Masters versus PhD or Return of the Alumni. And we have 6 amazing alumni on board. 3 of them are pursuing or have pursued a PhD, and the other 3 are master's students. So before we begin, let's have a general introduction from all of them. Aisha, can you go first?
Hi everyone, I'm Aisha. I'm LUMS batch of 2014. I am currently pursuing my PhD at UC Berkeley. I'm a 5th year student at UC Berkeley and hopefully plan to graduate in a year or so.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, Gohar, can you go next?
Yeah, my name is Gohar and I graduated from LUMS in 2016. Then I went to UIUC for a master's where I graduated in 2018. And now I'm working at Microsoft Research.
Amazing. Okay, Ifra, can you go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Ifra Idris. I graduated from LUMS in 2018. I directly went for my PhD. I am right now a 3rd year PhD candidate at Brown University, and I'm working in human-centered robotics. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ifra. Afan, can you go next? Your mic is muted.
Sorry. Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm Afan. I graduated in 2018 with IFRA. I'm currently pursuing my master's in Germany at RWTH Aachen. And yeah, I'm just about to finish my master's degree.
That's amazing. Isa, can you go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Isa. I graduated in 2019 and I went directly for my master's. So currently I'm in the 2nd year of my master's in computer graphics technology at Purdue.
Okay. And finally, last but not the least, Waji.
Sure. So I'm Waji. I am in my 6th year of PhD, hopefully the final one as well. And this, I graduated in 2015. Yeah, that's all from me.
Okay. So as everybody knows, we have a very power-packed panel ready with us. Let's get right into it. Agenda yahi tha, which I told you guys pehle bhi ke shuru mein we'll have introductions, and now we have some pre-planned questions. The first set of questions we have are, okay, which one should we go for out of Masters and PhD, and why? So Haram and I will be moderating this session. And if you guys have any questions, just drop your questions down in the chat and we'll filter those out and ask our amazing panelists. The first question are, I guess one PhD or one master student can volunteer to answer this. What are some key factors one should keep in mind while choosing between masters or PhD? Does anybody volunteer?
I can give the master's perspective. So I'll probably answer in a more generic way, and then people can pitch in. But I think one of the questions that you should ask yourself at this point is the amount of time commitment that you're going to put in either PhD or a master's. Is that time commitment worth what you aim to sort of achieve out of that? So, for example, if you're a bit unsure about whether or not you like doing research, or say you spent a summer in LUMS doing research with somebody and you didn't really enjoy it that much, or you enjoyed it a lot. Either way, you should be you have some sense of whether or not you want to spend time doing research, for example. That should be one of the factors that you should consider while sort of committing to a longer term education or training in research, for instance. And then similarly for masters, like if you're unsure, I think you could sort of use masters as a stepping stone. If you can do a master's with thesis, for example, that gives you some sort of intro level idea of what research looks like, what sort of doing partially independent research looks like, and it's sort of a good trailer to what lies ahead. So I think you don't have to be absolutely sure what you want to sort of pursue a PhD for, like what's the particular problem you're excited about, because I think that's not the expectation from a 3rd or 4th year undergraduate. But just having a sense of what your long-term sort of commitment looks like, and then allocating that large amount of time to something based on that is something I think is important.
Okay. Would anybody like to
Uh,
add anything?
I can go for the PhD perspective. So I think when you're pursuing a PhD, your passion for research matters a lot. And within that, there are multiple things you should actually look at. Like, sure, you enjoyed doing research at LUMS for a summer or something, but there are multiple things you can look at. So do you like reading research papers and understanding them really well? Do you like working on well-defined tasks for a specific research project? Or do you like coming up with new research projects and ideas, and you want to figure out ways to make them work no matter what happens? And the first two are good skills to have, but the third one is what you're actually looking for when you're trying to pursue a PhD. So can you come up with your own ideas? Can you drive them? Because in a PhD, in undergrad research, most of the time, your professors are doing the heavy lifting. They're defining the tasks, they're asking the problems. In a PhD, you are doing that all yourself. So that might be very different than what you think research is in terms of when you're doing an undergrad. So that's something that you should consider. Like, are you really passionate about research in terms of coming up with new ideas and driving them? Other than that, Gohar said time commitment is important, so I won't talk about that. But I would add that if money matters to you, PhD is probably not the right choice.
Why did you say that, Aisha? Just a follow-up question.
I can add on that.
This is coming from purely like a US based perspective. Like, if you're pursuing your PhD in US and then want to probably end up in US, if you start up with a master's and then go into industry, those, like, let's say on average a PhD is 6 years. You do a 2 years master and then you go into industry right away. 4 years, you have built experience. A PhD would, when you graduate, you would probably end up at the same level or slightly maybe even lower, because experience sometimes matters more. So if you and during your PhD you won't be earning that much, and that would be also something that you might want to consider. You won't be living like a good, very rich life.
That makes sense.
So it really comes down to, like, are you very, very passionate about it and about doing research and not other things?
There's one, oh, Vaji wanted to say something. I can go up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add on that one is, I think it is a terrible financial decision because there's a huge opportunity cost. You are letting go more than 100K if you are in US for about 4 years, if your PhD is in 6 years. And so you need to have a better reason to do that. One could be that you are passionate about research, or the other could be that you need a faculty job and you are looking for academic job, and for that you need to have a PhD. And besides, yeah, so these are the two things that basically comes to my mind when you need to decide for if you go for a PhD or a master's.
Okay. If I would like
one, yeah, there's just one. Oh, Afan, do you want to go first? You can go.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I just wanted to add on to what Aisha was saying, that one is you need to know how to define your own research projects. But one thing which is very common and which I have seen personally in my friends as well who are doing PhD over here, there's a lot of uncertainty in PhD. And this is in terms of like research. So when you're doing research and you're doing a PhD, you need to be really, really patient. And if you think, and sometimes life might get monotonous because you're thinking of the same problem from just different angles every day. So if you are someone who likes to do problem solving like that, only then choose a PhD because you really need to be resilient and patient. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Go ahead, Afan.
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of compare where in which country you are doing your PhD, because in Germany, at least I can speak for Germany, not maybe not for the rest of Europe, but at least in Germany, the PhD pay scale is kind of similar to your pay scale in industry. And if you do a PhD, I think Aisha said that you experience matters more if you get a PhD and if a master's student has a more experience. But in Germany, your PhD counts as your experience. And for example, if I'm doing my PhD, uh, I'm earning this at a similar pay scale as a master's student that just started his job. And after I finish my PhD, the time period I have done my PhD in does count as an experience, at least in German industry. And so I think this is one positive aspect of getting a PhD in Europe or from Germany. But there are two things to this road. I think I will talk more about them in the funding related topic. But if you get your master's from Germany and then you pursue your PhD from Germany, then you don't have to worry about your pay scale or that it's not about your expenses. It's pretty much well balanced with if you would be working in industry. So that's something I think probably another perspective of doing a PhD in Europe or in Germany in specific.
Okay, thank you, Vaji.
I
That's
would
an
just,
one. Uh,
sorry.
sorry,
Yeah,
I
I just wanted to add that if you're not sure, if you really like research or if you want to do a PhD, that is another reason you could go for your master's and then try to figure that out while you're in grad school. Because I would say when I came into master's, I was like 90% I'm gonna go for a PhD, and now I'm like at a zero. So you can, I think, because like others said as well, the kind of research you do in undergrad is different, and your idea of research is different. But when you come to graduate school, when you actually get involved in research here, you realize, or you try to like understand it more, and then you also get to work similarly, have opportunities to work on, depending on where you are, like industry related projects maybe, and then you can kind of position yourself better and see what you like more.
Okay, thank you everyone. Moving ahead, हमने बात किया time commitment की, we've talked about money, we've talked about jobs. One thing that as a senior and a lot of my friends also are considering is that we are undergrads and we don't have a lot of solid research experience, and some of us want to go directly for a PhD. तो इस हिसाब से सवाल ये है कि do you have to have a very strong research background in undergrad to go for a PhD, or should you just go for an MS thesis if you feel like कि बहुत strong research background नहीं है मेरा?
I can actually add to that. Like,
Okay.
so one thing is that I completely understand when you're doing undergrad, जो culture undergrad में है research का, everyone is doing their best for a research project, but in systems it's difficult to get, like I'm talking from like a systems perspective, it's difficult to get research papers. So usually the undergrads might not have generally a research paper. Now there are different like research category universities. I'm in the US at least. The R1 research universities, they're really competitive and they really want a good research profile. They're really looking for research papers over there. But then there are like universities which are a lower rank than that, where even if you don't have research papers, but you're applying with a strong SOP, where you say कि आपने ये projects किए हैं, and in these projects you have learned these research skills. So you have a really strong like an SOP that will really add to your like strong profile and will help you get in. And there are even lower rank where even if you don't have like a really good research paper profile, but again SOP is relatively good, you can still get in. So it really depends on like the sort of universities that you're targeting when you're applying. And second thing which also depends is like a lot is your matching with the professor that you're going to apply for. Whether the advisor, like it's usually like there are other like apps से related चीजें भी, but when you're applying, obviously have a strong SOP, even if you don't have like good research papers. But along with that, reach out to the professors, because the people who are in the US, they already have an advantage. They're already like in the US, like jab COVID nahi tha, they used to directly go into the labs, talk to the professors. We don't have that advantage. So it's really good to send an email, but koi generic email nahi, exactly talk about what your researcher is doing. So there's a lot of like effort, one like even if you think a research paper nahi hai, but there are other areas that you can target and make your profile strong. So please don't give up. When I applied, I did not have a research paper, so there were other things that I had to reach out to, like professors, make my SOP strong. And there are some जो कि GRE को भी weightage देते हैं, but now there are universities जो कि GRE को भी इतना focus नहीं दे रहे, but they look at the math score, but they mostly focus कि whether you can do research or not. So that's the main thing that you need to show. So yeah, but please feel free for others to add on.
That's a very insightful point. Ifra, can somebody from Masters tell कि एक सवाल आया chat में कि how important is our research profile when applying for masters?
Typically, I don't think it's very important. I think it's a good to have, but I think especially for a master's without thesis, you can sort of think of it as an extension to your undergraduate, because if you don't have a thesis in your master's, then there's no expectation that you should be, well versed in doing research or so on. As long as you have, for example, if you're applying to a top tier school, as long as you have good coursework and you have, a decent GPA and so forth, that for a non-thesis master's usually suffices. And then for a thesis master's too, I think it's not even close to how much sort of research proficiency you need to demonstrate in your SOP or research papers, like Ifra mentioned. It's nice to have, but I don't think I've seen people enter masters with thesis in decent schools without, say, strong publications and so on. I mean, you can definitely say that I've worked on projects, but having a publication, I don't think is really a necessity.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah, I can just add that it kind of depends also. So if you're applying for master's thesis, what having somewhat, and you don't need to have papers, but like if first said, just having that interest in demonstrating that, it helps you get connected with professors and potentially get funding. So yeah, for US master's thesis, you coming in, you can, maybe get like a TA or an R-ship if you are able to make that connection. In Canada, master theses are already fully funded, but there's a GPA criteria cutoff. But then also, if you do get, again, it's like in some universities, you're asked to get connected with professors and have them take you on before like applying. So I think that's where it becomes important to kind of still talk a bit about your research interests.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Aiza. Let's move on to something that's really important when making this decision. These are funding opportunities for each of them. सवाल ये है कि how likely are you to get funding for either of them? And masters के लिए हमने सुना है कि it's harder. Like PhD usually are selective, but they're more fully funded usually. So what's your perspective on this, both from the PhD side and the master's side? How do you guys go about funding yourselves during your degree?
So I can speak for the PhD perspective. So most of the times, either your department or your advisor is funding your PhD, but that's not always the case. Like sometimes you come to the department, they pay for the first semester, but then you have to either do a TA-ship from then on. So that's like, but usually you do find TA-ship opportunities, and I guess the same could go for masters. Like like at least in UC Berkeley, like master students can apply, like very easily apply for TA-ship, and they are usually preferred. And there are a lot of opportunities here. And then there are a lot of scholarships and fellowships that are offered. So there's like, they are more rare, but they are still there. So there's Microsoft scholarship, there's Google scholarship, IBM, Intel. And then there are a lot of small niche fellowships that like emails come in, and you could apply for those for a PhD. So what I've seen, at least what students do here in US when they're applying, like I've seen undergrads apply here, they apply for a fellowship even before applying for a PhD program. And they think that improves their chances.
That's great.
There's
Okay.
there's one thing I just wanted to add. So there's a difference between this in the US. There's a difference for funding between the state universities and like the private universities. So in the private universities, what Aisha said is perfectly matched. But when you apply to the state universities, there are chances that you might have problems in getting the funding, even if the first year you might get funding, but in the later years, like there are some state universities where you get the stipend, but then you need to use that stipend to actually pay for your tuition. And so when you apply, please be careful like when you get the offer, please be careful to read all the terms and conditions, because obviously if you're using your stipend to pay the tuition, which is not the case in the private universities, your living um, stipend for your living is going to be reduced yourself. So yeah, that's just one thing.
Okay, can we also have the master's perspective? Okay, fine. Yes.
I can just
Yeah,
add
so-
on that one. So
Yeah.
from big state universities or top 40 or 50 state universities, I think it's easier to find TAship. For example, at UIUC, we are actually looking for TAs, and we usually don't find TAs in our department, so we have to go to other departments like civil and mechanical to find TAs. And if you are TA or RA, your fees is basically, your tuition fees is waived, so you don't need to worry about that one, and you are getting stipend on top of that. And this is not just the case with UIUC. I think this is the case with top 40 private state universities in terms of grad school. Yeah, that's the case. But other than that, you can always get RAship. In computer science, especially, we are privileged because we have a lot of funding especially in the top areas like machine learning, security, systems. If you are working in these sort of areas, then hopefully, yeah, your advisor will have money to pay for your stipend and tuition.
Okay.
So I think probably I have to kind of describe the education system in Germany. It's very different in Germany because in Germany, the top universities are all state universities or public universities. It's if you go to a private university, it's not considered. You are considered just as an elite kid who can afford private universities. It's harder to get in public universities than into private universities. I don't know, but probably we all have heard of Jacobs from Germany. It's a private university. It's very easy to get in. The thing is, if you have researched about Germany, or I think if the audience knows about Technical University Munich, RWTH Aachen, TU Berlin, LMU Munich, all these universities are public universities. So the good thing about Germany is you don't have to pay anything as tuition. It's free, right? The bad part is you have to be good to get into these universities, right? So yeah, sorry, I will take some time on this measure. But if you're good enough, if you have a normal profile, you can get into, for example, Jacobs or any other private universities by paying the tuition fee. They always kind of, in my experience and people I've seen, they always kind of give you admission. But regarding public universities, it's very hard to get in, even for Germans themselves. It's considered, for example, how people consider getting into LUMS in Pakistan is how people consider getting into TU Munich or RWTH in Germany. Regarding funding opportunities, if you go for a master's, there is no tuition fee. However, you have to pay a semester fee, which includes your traveling cost for the whole semester, and it varies from state to state. But for example, in my state, it goes around. I think now it's 300 euros per semester, and in Germany, the semester is for like half a year, so it's like 6 months. So it's 6 months, 300 euros for 6 months, and depending on state to state, for example, in my state, it's NRW. I don't know, it's like Cologne, Düsseldorf, Aachen, in the northwest of Germany, I can travel free. I can travel on my semester ticket, which I've paid in the beginning for next 6 months, freely, as much travel as I want, right? And it consists of student union fees, but nothing regarding your tuition fee. On top of that, you can do part-time jobs and do TA-ships and stuff like that, and work as a research assistant, and get extra money to, I don't know, do fun stuff. Regarding PhD, this is very I think important for people. Regarding PhD, Germany usually don't accept people directly into PhD. You can get in, but either you have to be really exceptional to convince the professor that, oh, I'm sitting in here in Pakistan, I have done an absolute remarkable bachelor's degree with focus on research, and that I am worthy of getting into your PhD program. Usually, they always select people who have already done their master's. So you either have two options: do your master's in Pakistan and then apply for a PhD, or do your master's from Germany and then pursue your PhD. Regarding the funding options with PhD, I think there was one question from the audience that what about a DAD scholarship? So DAD is basically, I don't know if it's the right comparison, but like kind of Fulbright. Like the German government pays you regarding in the time for your PhD. DAD is usually focused on PhD and not for, maybe you can search a very few master's program, but DAD is basically for PhD programs. So when you can apply for that and you get, I think, 1,000 euros per month, which is really, really less if you compare it with if you do your master's in Germany and then you pursue your PhD, you get a 2,500 euros per month. And that's after tax. So like people going, so to apply for a DAD, you have to be in, I think, in Pakistan, and you have to apply from Pakistan, go there. So if you apply from Pakistan after doing a master's, you get to, I think you get 1,000 euros per month for, I don't know, 4 years or 4.5, how much longer your PhD is, right? But if you do your master's from Germany, and if you're already in Germany and you apply on your own to a PhD program, you get after taxes 2,500 euros per month, which is a lot. I think we all kind of live on the edge with expenses, which is a lot of difference. So that's really important to know which option suits you best, or yeah, the rest I think people have to just kind of calculate and know how they want to pursue it and how they want to get, whether they want to apply for that scholarship and directly go there. And it's also, I know it seems very interesting, oh, I can get DAD from Pakistan and then just go there, but you have to kind of live on 1,000 euros per month for the next 4 years, compared to where you could have a possibility of getting 2,500 per month. So I think that's pretty important. And regarding masters, there isn't any specific scholarship, although once you have started your masters in a university, like how I did, then you can apply. Once you are there and you started it, for example, after your first semester, during your first semester, then you can apply for scholarship, university scholarships or government scholarship. But getting a scholarship for a master's while being in Pakistan, it's there may be some cases, but it's very rare. So yeah, I think I had to mention this.
Okay, fun. That was really, really insightful. I personally did not know about that. Acha, last question from my side, and then Haram will take over. A lot of questions were as well as on our list is that there is this perception that it's easier to get into masters compared to PhD, and or vice versa, whichever is the case. But to get into either, you need a good profile. So how would you guys define a good profile? Research le lein, GRE le lein, GPA le lein. If somebody's targeting top schools or middle tier schools or lower schools, so what would a profile be like, a solid profile for either of the programs, masters or PhD?
I can add for a PhD.
Okay.
So first thing that professor will look at is your reference letters. So if you can get good reference letters, that speaks a lot. So that's the first thing that they care about. But it's usually, I understand it's usually hard to get when you are only, when you are in LUMS and you're doing just an undergrad and you don't have much of a research experience. So letter writers don't have that much things to write about you. Besides that, you took class and stuff like that. So it's better to get good reference letter. It's advisable to get involved in research earlier. So they have more perspective, so that the letter writers have more perspective about your research and how can you perform. Other than that, GRE scores, recently there is a huge movement that they are trying to abolish this GRE score. So at least in big schools or in US, most of them have so far abandoned this GRE practices. So they are not asking for GRE. What else is there? So yeah, as Ifra mentioned, SOP is really, really important. So you need to provide good perspective about your research and what you can do. One thing that she also mentioned was don't write generic emails to professor. Don't do that. Just don't do that. If you send an email to professor that you know about, if you know his or her research, and in that you need to be very specific, like you read these papers and you found these things, because you need to convince them, okay, you can work on this is something that interests you, you did your literature survey or stuff like that. And this is something happened recently. I can share some stories. So my advisor got an email last month or so from some undergrad, and he was saying that I'm interested in your research group and in your research, and I wanted to join, and is there any options and stuff like that. And he did not just stop there. He had a huge paragraph where he explained or basically summarized our research group's whole research in a very sort of concise way, and attached a mind map of all the papers that we publish and how they interconnect and stuff like that. And my advisor was blown away right away. So he was like, this guy already did what he was supposed to do for his first month or so, or second month or so, when he was going to join here. So he already did that stuff. So it's really great. So that's how you can basically, that's how you can convince the professor that you are a good fit for the research group. Don't write generic emails. They just goes to spam and like trash.
Vaji, where would you rate GPA ka effect PhD or masters mein?
Not that much, because they understand that first of all, professors usually don't know like what is LUMS and what are other universities in Pakistan. So they don't have any sort of like a baseline to define what does this GPA actually means. So yeah, reference letters, SOP, and if you can write a good email, that might be able to help you, but GPA, not that much for sure.
Is that also the case for masters?
So I can add a little bit to that. So I think for PhD, there's probably a lot more for a potential advisor or the admissions committee to look at, because you have reference letters like what you mentioned, and then you have put a lot of work into your SOP and so forth. In masters, from what I've seen, and this might not be sort of largely true, but this is at least from what I've seen from my batch and so on, that the GPA sort of defines what tier of schools you end up in. I'm not saying that you have to have like an outstanding GPA or like 4.0 or whatever, but since there aren't too many things to look from for a master's application, generally what I've seen is that for top tier schools, people who have decent GPAs sort of end up there, and then like if you go probably one step down from the top tier schools, then a lot more options open up and so on. So it's not like you have to have a very sort of 3.9, 4.0 GPA kind of thing to get into a good master's program. But I think that's one of the very important distinguishing factors, because there's not, if you don't have a lot of research experience to show on, then you have to have some competitive edge from other applicants people are applying from all around the world, right? So you have to have something to sort of show for yourself. And I think one of the things that possibly also helps a little bit is if you've taken some grad level courses, for example. So that sort of shows that you tried a little bit more than the average undergrad in your class. So if you took like a bunch of, I don't know, 500 level courses and so on, that sort of gives you a little bit of edge, and provided that you performed well in them. Yeah. And that also gives you an opportunity to work sort of more closely with the professor at LUMS, which can lead to a better recommendation.
Okay.
And you can add more stuff in your SOP about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add, since I looked at both Canada and US. So for Canada, I think there's a lot of the top universities where master's thesis is for sure funded. There's a GPA cutoff. So if you meet that, I think it's around 3.3. So if you meet that, your master's would be funded. For the US, again, I think it, like Gohar said too, it depends on what universities you're applying to. And then also within those universities, which programs. So some programs would have maybe GPA cutoffs, but other programs value skills and your profile a lot more. And then this relates to also, you know, the getting funding part, because getting it in the second year is relatively a lot easier. Like I think now in my department, almost everyone has it in their second year because you're already working with the people. Getting in the first year, that's the tough part. So that's where, you know, saying, oh, I have this profile, getting connected with professors. And I think that's where also reaching out to alumni and asking them, okay, you know, you're in this university, you know, who are some professors who do regularly get TAs, with whom it's possible to get a TA-ship in the, or RA-ship in the first year as well. So I think that's where, you know, if you're able to get your foot in the door, so I think once you're connected with the professor, then your GPA, it wouldn't matter as much. And some programs don't really have that cutoff as well.
Okay. Okay. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Okay, fine.
I would like to add one thing. Just an informal statement, but I think we've all heard in our life, in our period during LUMS, that oh, GPA doesn't matter and it doesn't matter. This statement is true and false at the same time. GPA doesn't matter when you have other things to compensate for it. But if you don't have other things to compensate for it, it matters. So just don't deliberately go around that GPA doesn't matter, so I don't need to work for it. You have to work for it until you have some other substantial thing to prove for it. And regarding your profiles in Germany, I think it's kind of the world we live in. You need to have a cutoff at some point, right? So if you're applying on GPA basis, or if your GPA contributes to your profile in a way that if you're applying to really good universities, they will at some point look at your GPA, right? But I've seen people with 2.2 CGPAs, 2.4 CGPAs, but with 4 or 5 years of work experience. So they kind of compensated with something else. So you can't just, oh, I just did my undergrad with a 2.4 and I just want to go to master's. Yes, you can get in, well, some university. There are a lot of universities in Germany, so you can get into some university if you just want to kind of just go for a master's. But if you really want a good, valuable master's degree from a good university, you need to have a good profile. And I think there was one question that what is a good profile? I can only answer with respect to in Germany. German universities just don't pinpoint one thing. So you don't need to have a specific GRE score, a specific GPA score to, you know, they kind of make a point system where everything contributes to your point system. So a higher GPA would contribute to your point system more, but if you have a higher work experience, it would contribute also. So everything, even if you have publications or, I don't know, internships, work experience, everything contribute in some way. So even if you have a low GPA or low GRE score, you can still kind of make it your profile a good profile by doing internships or, I don't know, do a 1-year job experience and stuff like that, and reference letters. So there's, for Germany at least, there's no hardcore definition of what is a good profile. It's just a combination of different stuff. But I just want to, what I learned, and I really want to tell this to my juniors, that just don't go around and live with the statement, oh, GPA doesn't matter, so we don't need to care about it. You have to care about it. You are there for one reason. until you have, I don't know, you have a very remarkable project going on, which you can kind of, later present it to professors and say, oh, my GP is bad. Like how you write an SOP, right? You say, I have done this, and this is my project, which I have worked a really, I put a lot of effort and time in. So that's why my GP is suffered, and stuff like that. But just don't go like, why is your GP, like, if you didn't do anything else, then why is your GP low? Because you didn't pay attention to your classes. So like, I'm not saying it can never be just you, if you have a bad GP, you're done, but just don't deliberately do it. We have all heard about it, and it really, at this point in life, it just really is like, oh, this is a very, I don't know, wrong statement to live by.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Just to like add to it or like summarize it, I think all the professors are looking for is something to set you apart from the rest of the group. So you want to look different. And GPA and GRE are usually not factors that make you look different. But you also don't want them to be red flags in the other sense. So just to summarize.
Okay, now we're moving on to the next sections जो Haram will moderate. These are masters की अलग से थोड़े से सवाल हैं और PhD के थोड़े से अलग सवाल हैं. Before we move ahead, I would like to ask the panelists के कुछ सवाल आ रहे हैं, and some of them are very specific, so I'm not going to be reading them up aloud. But if you guys can just answer them personally, because some of them are like directed at Afan, some of are directed at other people, PhD students. So if you guys can just साथ answer that would be great. Okay, Haram. You can take over from here.
Yeah, so like people are very confused about masters and PhD, right? Similarly, they're very, very confused about which type of masters to go for, because there's a master's with thesis, and then there's one without, and then Canada also has a co-op one, right? So like we talked about what the key factors are that one should consider before choosing between masters and PhD, but what are the key factors one should take into account when they're choosing between the different types of masters?
I can start if nobody else wants to. So for example, at UC, there's both the tracks. You can do a master's with thesis and without thesis. It sort of depends. So we've talked a lot about research in the panel so far, but what are the options if you don't want to do research? Like if there's one thing right now is that I don't want to do research, what is it that sort of excites you? There's things like going to the industry. You can sort of, does working on a particular product or creating products or working on a product group, product team excite you? Sort of, if that's what sort of your ambition, then you don't really have to do a thesis masters. Masters can basically act as a stepping stone to industry. And one of the sort of most vital things about these US top university master's programs is the career fairs and the connections they have to a vast number of companies, small and large companies, and so on. So they have these career fairs probably twice or thrice a year. And if industry or going to a large company or a startup or whatever is your objective, I think you don't need to invest too much time into a thesis. You take sort of a broad class of courses at your master's program, and then you put that effort that you would otherwise have put into your thesis towards preparing for job interviews, for example. And that's one thing that lots of people don't know until they go to sort of grad school for masters, is that for the first summer, you have to sort of, it's very likely that you will be doing an internship. So if you sort of start preparing for that ahead of time, that's something that will be really helpful. So if you know that you're not going to pursue research in the long run, I think it's fine to just don't pursue a thesis master's. Just go to sort of take courses, understand what sort of state of the art is, like take different courses that you couldn't in LUMS. For example, there's like virtual reality courses, there's a lot of machine learning courses and all of those things. And then equip yourself better to understand what the industry needs at this point and how can you sort of get an exciting job in the industry. So yeah, that's just to sort of talk a little bit about what we didn't touch on so far, other than what doing research or, yeah.
Yeah, I can add there. So I think one thing is, and so this would depend very on like for some thesis programs, it might be easier to get funding because it, like there would be RShip positions. So it really depends if like funding is, I think is important to you.
then looking at if you're able to get that in co-ops, if you're able to get that more in thesis programs. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing is that so it depends on according to universities and the program. So I'll give my program's example. So my program is, although like it has different concentrations in it, by default some are thesis, but there are some options where they're non-thesis and it's like a capstone project. And I'm in the capstone project track, but I was still able to get involved with the research lab and do research during one summer and even work on like a paper publication. So even in non-thesis masters, you can still get involved with research and still, get an idea of what research is and try to figure that out for yourself. So it would really vary according to like the university and program that you're applying to. So understanding those differences would be helpful, I think. Yeah, I think that was it for.
Okay, so moving on, another confusion that people generally do have is, especially people who aim to go into the industry eventually, right? Is going for a master's even worth it? Because especially if you're going to go in the US, funding is an issue for masters, a lot more than as compared to PhD, right? So is it even worth it going for a master's program and then going for a job, or should you like work for a few years and then maybe, like Afan mentioned, if you have a bad GPA, like a relatively lower GPA, I would say like a 2.4 or a 2.5, for example, you should like work for a few years and maybe make up for that in a way and then go for a master's program, right? So, but what if at this point someone has a good GPA, but they're unsure if it's even worth it going for a master's? Is it like, is the pay more? Well, like, what's the comparison like between going into the industry now and then going for your master's? Because you're gonna pay for it a lot, right?
I think one thing is so I think like, okay, so you can do a job first and then go for a master's for a bunch of reasons, like you said, getting that, building up your profile. But I think also if you're not sure right now, if you wanna like what fields you wanna go into, it is kind of important to know that, PhD you have a lot of years, but masters it's really fast tracked. You come in, first year you come in September, you'll be still trying to figuring things out, but then you'll also be applying for internships, right? It is really, there is a lot of pressure, and if at that point you're not sure what you want to do, so I think that adds to it. So if you do take a year, you do take a gap year, you get some work experience, you try to figure things out more before you come here, and you're more prepared to like start applying for things. Because I know for me personally, I was really confused between master's, PhD, between like even engineering, UX, product, and then trying to figure that out. It's really stressful because I spent my whole year doing that. So that's one thing. But another thing is you could also do that, figuring things out. You could also do that when you're here, but that would affect some other things. In masters, in some places, there, if you're on funding, there's an option to kind of extend your year as well. So some people normally do finish their masters even in 3 years. So if you do need some more time, you can come here, take your time, figure things out, and then even extend your graduation. That's one thing. I think another thing where you talk about if masters is even worth it. So I think if your goal is to come to the US and work in the industry over here, then definitely like being here and being able to apply to those opportunities, it's different than, I mean, I don't know, like I doubt it will be really difficult to come directly to the US, especially like given COVID and everything right now. So that's one thing. Another thing is like getting access to opportunities. So in here, like there's courses where they partner with like industry sponsors, and you get to work on like those projects. So I think even like building your profile and like your skill set, and even understanding the nuances and in the kind of fields or things you're interested in. So I think that's another thing that that's really helpful when you're actually in the program and doing those projects. Yeah, and having those access to opportunities. And even for like if you're doing masters, if you want to go for a PhD while you're still here, you even have access to go to graduate school fairs, get connected with people in like other universities, because your professors are directly working with those people. So even for like better PhD opportunities, I think if you're in the masters, you get that as well.
I would like to add something. So when I graduated from Alums, I directly actually went to work at Microsoft for a year and a half. So that is still definitely a possibility. You can do it. After working a year, I decided that I wanted to do a PhD, and I was more interested in that. But there are opportunities available. They're getting harder and harder, especially in the US, because of all visa and COVID problems. But there are still options, and something that you could do is maybe go to conferences like Anita Borg and stuff like that. And there they have like huge career fairs where you can meet people and apply for jobs. So that might be an option if you directly want to go that route. Yeah, so conferences definitely, and right now, since most of the conferences are shifting online, that might be a good thing for students in Pakistan. You can go online, and they have these like nice gather spaces where you can just walk around and meet people, and you can interact with them like you were there. So that might be something that you might want to look into.
Does anyone want to add? Okay. So now coming to academia, right? So some people who want to go into academia just directly go for a PhD, but some people who aren't very sure choose to go for a master's in like with thesis, and then they plan to go for a PhD, and then there's also an option of master's leading to a PhD. So my question is, which one would be a better option if someone's like 70 or 80% sure they want to end up in the academia and like not just do research and then shift somewhere else? Sort of confusing, I know, but like yeah, I can rephrase it if it's still confusing. Okay, so essentially, Isa, mute her if you want to talk.
Ifra wants to speak, Hara.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure, is it directed towards like masters or PhD, or you're talking
Anyone
about
can
in general?
answer.
Okay,
In
okay.
general.
So just to rephrase your question, you're asking that if someone wants to enter academia, is masters the route to go, or PhD? Is that your question?
No, it's essentially that some people aren't ready for a 6-year commitment, right, for a PhD. So some people are like, maybe we can do a master's with thesis, and then maybe once we're 100% sure कि ये करना है, then we can go for a PhD.
Okay, okay. Now I get it. Okay. So the thing is that first of all, in academia, there are two types of positions. One is the teaching position, where you only teach and you have less focus on research. And then the other is like the research oriented, where you're writing grants, getting fellowships for your student, and you have like a big research lab. Okay. So one thing in the US, if you want to enter academia, which is like the research focused, you definitely need to have like a PhD. For those who are still confused, I'm adding on to what Isa already said. For those who are still confused, because in undergrad, directly from undergrad, it's like you're thinking, what's the long-term goal, like long-term career you want? It's hard. For the people who are really not sure, doing a master's is completely fine, and figuring out what you want to do, especially because the research that you do in LUMS is very different from the research that you do here, because research is very well defined in your undergrad. It is not at all well defined. It's like a lot of thinking, and like it involves a lot of thinking, and it's like more in depth in the US. So if you want to like get a taste of it, do your master's. But obviously, if you want to enter academia, you'll have to do PhD. And there's another option, which is like postdoc, which you do after your PhD. So these are like, you have PhD, then you have your postdoc, and this is to build your profile to be really competitive for the positions in academia that are research oriented. Those positions which are teaching oriented, usually I can't say about like people who have directly gone from masters, because I have like I think my network or connection is like limited in that. But usually people in that I know have completed their PhDs, And instead of doing a postdoc to make them like research competitive profiles, they have directly gone to like universities for a teaching position. And the question that whether you should do a master's and then a PhD, you should also consider like how much time do you want to actually spend. One is to make your profile strong. And if you want to make it really, really strong and you want to go to a really, really good institution, if you think, then you can do your master's, you can do your PhD. You're like, I want to do research for the rest of my life. Then be my guest. But some people, sometimes like life hits and sometimes you don't just have time and you need to make choices, especially sometimes financial constraints hit, like Aisha has said. So this will actually depend on the personal journey that you're in. But the factors to consider are how much time do you want to spend. If you think you're really sure you want to do a PhD, please don't do a master's. Directly come to PhD, because you get like a master's leading to PhD on your way. But if you're unsure, doing like a master's is also a good option. So like different factors will weigh in. But even if and those people that might think that, okay, in undergrad, I don't have a research paper, will I be able to enter academia? Maybe master's will give me a time. Don't worry, there is a postdoc opportunity here to make your profile even stronger after the PhD. So yeah, consider about all these factors, but others can like add to it too.
I think that pretty much sums it up. I think that's all now. Does anyone want to ask a question? They can like raise their hand and we can take questions.
I think we can just look at the question answers and
Yeah.
just
There's one question. Okay, how is a master's degree from Germany different from a master's degree from US from research perspective? Does anyone want to add that question? Maybe a fun?
Yeah, I'm not sure in what exact context they are asking, but to just give an overview of how a master's degree in Germany is. Also, I will try to cover the rest of the German related questions too. So basically, when you get into a master's in Germany, not sure if this applies to every university, but you have, I think, 5 or 6 years to complete your master's. After 6 years, you are kind of, I don't know, whatever they do, but you have 6 years to complete your master's. So you can take your courses pretty easily. And also there's one thing I think everyone would agree with, hear me, how you get grades in LUMS, or how you get, you go to TAs and you just get, oh, I just need to pass this course, so 1 mark and I would be fine. This doesn't happen, at least in Germany. I'm pretty sure this doesn't happen in US or Canada too. So I have seen people failing with 0.4 mark, and they don't care if you fail it or if you don't. Just appear it for it next time. If a year is wasted for you, they don't care. They just said that you have 6 years. Also, I think the one thing you have to consider is, because you don't pay tuition fee in Germany, so they know that you don't pay for it, in a sense that, oh, you don't have a burden of tuition fee. So they don't kind of, well, some accommodate you in this sense, but most of them usually don't accommodate you. If you're failing with a 0.5, they would let you with a 0.5. So there's no, and they really find it rude if you argue with them, or if you're just kind of, begging with them. They don't find it, Germans don't find it really this as a good practice. Like, I think the myth that Germans are pretty rude, they're not rude, they're just very ethical and straightforward, and they just follow the rules. That's it. So you have kind of 6 years to complete your master's in Germany, and within that 6 years, you can take, I don't know, 2 courses every semester. You can complete it in 1.5 years. Like, there's no limit. The max limit is like 6 years. So I've seen people who arrived, I think, in 2015 in the same program that I'm about to complete my master's in, and they still have 2 courses left, and they haven't started their thesis yet. but yeah, they are earning in different companies. You have, I think this probably would be a good question for the next panel. But if you are going to just, you know, for yourself, and you just want to kind of support yourself when you're there and not your family, then delaying your masters and figuring out life and just, you know, going with the pace that you can actually follow is perfectly normal. Like, don't rush into it unless you have to. And so you just have 6 years to complete your masters, and it's not easy. Masters is not easy. A lot of people think that, oh, they will just go there, just do courses, and, you know, in a flash they will just get done with masters. I have a lot of people asking me, oh, I just want to go for the masters. Why they don't have the answer for why. They just want a master's degree and, you know, just go abroad. And one thing I need to add is that because it's Germany, their national language is German. Although everyone speaks English, but they would always prefer if you speak German. Also, while applying to master courses, master programs, you need to apply for international programs. International programs are master programs that are in English. You can, when you're there, you can take courses which are in German too, but you need to apply for for programs that are international and that are mainly designed for English-speaking students. However, if you're doing a PhD or if you're applying for PhD, your professor would expect you to, you know, learn German really fast, because you're working in a department, you're working in an environment that, you know, everyone speaks German. And for, like, if you're starting your PhD, right, like they give you space, they give you time to learn it, but you have to learn it. Like, they can't just keep you know, hold meetings in English because, oh, this one person who just arrived doesn't speak German. So you kind of, with time, need to learn German, in the sense that you have to settle there. However, if you are planning to just do your masters and come back, then yeah, you can survive on English, but it's always better to, you know, learn the language that is spoken widely in that country. I don't know if there's any other German related question.
एक इशू है इसमें कि बहुत ज़्यादा सवाल जर्मनी के हैं, तो we can probably discuss this in the next panel, which is across regions. Abhi, let's just focus on if you have any PhD or master's related questions. I think last question I'll ask, which is a general question. There's some questions about the general trajectory, that when you're starting applications, so what is something you should start off with and how to go about things. Okay, masters ke liye apply karna, what should the first steps be? How should one go ahead with it? How should one start with their SOPs? We have detailed sessions on SOPs, so we don't really need to go into details into that. But generally, application, last question of the day, and then we could probably call it a day for you guys, not for us. But what would you guys suggest? How should one go about the research, the planning, the starting phase of an application?
I can try to take a stab. So I think when you're kind of making that list, a lot of factors come into play. So like, you know, like some places have those GPA cutoffs. If, you know, if you qualify, if you don't. Another thing is like for funding, like especially if I speak for masters, then, you know, not all universities would offer funding. Another thing I would say for masters to check is, you know, when you're applying, look at the university's policies for TA, like, because funding in masters is through TA or RShips, you know, so checking that, you know, TA or RShip does give a tuition waiver. So that's one thing. Some places only give a stipend, other places give waiver plus a stipend. So looking at that, I think when you start like adding those criteria, your list kind of really decreases. And then if in some places, you know, alumni, I think getting connected with them, asking them to, you know, like tell you which professors would be good to reach out to, what are some funding opportunities, because you can get funding in masters, but I think, you know, you do need to put in a lot of effort. I reached out to a lot of people. Like my funding in masters came from a different department actually, so I even reached out to people in other departments. So I think it is a lot of work. Get started early, you know, make those lists of universities, then like, okay, these are the professors I'm going to reach out to, have some templates that, you know, you can kind of use where you talk about yourself, you talk about your research. Yeah, I think if someone wants to add to that.
Okay, I can say something about that for the trajectory. Start looking for universities right now where you want to apply. And don't just get fixated on the ranking of the university. Look for the groups that are doing good, publishing. There is a website called csranking.org. Check mark on the areas that you are interested in, and because they sort by number of publications. And look for the professor who is active in the area. So if you are looking in security, go to that website and check mark security, and then look for the professors that are basically publishing in top four conferences in security. So start looking for universities right now. Ask your reference letter writers right now that you need a reference letter. At least 1 month, because professors are usually very busy, so you need to make sure that you at least give them 1 month. Start writing your SOP. Ask for help. Make sure a lot of people go over your SOP. Maybe ask your seniors who have already done this. Other than that, I don't think I have anything to add.
There's one thing I want to add to. So it's not just connect to the alumni, but for example, if it's, and this is applicable for both getting the funding for like your master's and for your PhD, also actually send emails to the students in the lab that you're interested in, because and share your profile and be very like confident, because people in the US do this. Ask them, can you give me feedback on how strong my profile is? And if they have time, they will actually reach out to you and say that, okay, we are looking for like maybe more publications, or we are looking for like more experience in this area, or this is like very specific project that we are working on, and we are thinking of like inducting PhD students in that. So getting like the insight from them is good. And also reach out to the network of your instructors that you're working with. Your instructors already know some of the professors in the US. They will connecting with them will help you not only getting like funding, but for your masters, but also will help you connect for like your prospective PhD advisors as well. So yeah, these were the
Okay. Okay, that was really
I
helpful.
want,
I think. Hanji Fan, last
I
point.
just want to add two things. One thing, as what you said, just don't focus on ranking. It matters, but it matters to an extent. Just go to a university. Especially if you want to settle in Germany, in German industry, the university name, it's not like as in Pakistan and US. Like if it's a public university and it's a good university, I hire you based on your skills. The second thing is, in Germany, you usually have to write. Most of the time, you have to write a master's thesis. In that, you have two options. You either write a master's thesis with industry corporation, or you just write a research thesis with the department. If you just want to go to an industry after a master's, it's preferable to do a thesis with an industry corporation or with some company. But if you want to pursue a PhD, it's better to work with the department, write a research-based thesis, and make connections. As I think everyone mentioned, just make connections. Ask your supervisors, and just ask for people in different departments and ask for their opinions on your profile. It's one thing. I think it's a very cliche statement, but rejection is not a bad thing. Like you may get rejected from some department or from some supervisor or from some PhD students, but you will eventually get what you want in one way or another, right? You just need to figure out which, like for example, now I'm kind of specializing in software systems, right? When I arrived, I had, in a sense, no idea of what I really wanted to specialize in. A lot of my friends who arrived in the same program are like now specializing in data science, some are in machine learning. So you still have the option, just you don't have to be really fixated on what you want to do when you arrive. It's perfectly normal. So just don't, it's better to be organized if you can be at some point, but it's okay if you aren't, and you can figure it out later as you go with your flow of your, life.
Okay, fun. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. Before we end, we would like to take a picture with all of you, if that's fine. We just wanted a screenshot. So just so we have it on our, like on a record so many amazing alumni came and helped us out for our first event and trusted us. The other participants can't speak because I'm not good disabled kiya hua hai, lekin I'm pretty sure they're all going to be really thankful to all of you. So Marina, are you taking a picture? Screenshot ले रही हो? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ifra, Gohar, Waji, Aisha, Afan. All of you have been really, really helpful. We need to move on to the next session, but it's great. It has been great connecting to you, and we'd like to network with you forward. आप लोगों से Slack link share हो जाएगी जो बच्चों के साथ भी हम करेंगे इंशाल्लाह. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
I
so much.
hope this was
Thank
helpful
you.
for everyone. Yeah.
And I would encourage everyone to reach out, just like email, Slack, whatever, if they have any more specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, that was the first session. To the participants, you should probably stay back because our next session, which is on regions, is going to start in like 5